Hello everyone, this is Kat, and welcome back to My Hero Academia Podfics. This will be the start of the fic entitled Todoroki's Conspiracy. This fic is 20 chapters long, with just over 30,000 words, so it's not a super long fic. And the summary is in which Todoroki believes his conspiracy a little too much and ends up wanting to protect his friend. Chapter 1. Todoroki's Conspiracy. If there's one thing that Shoto Todoroki knows, it's that everyone has their secrets, from the greatest hero to the lowest villain. To all that remains between that gap, each person has something that they hide from the world, and Izuku Midoriya is no different. Shoto may not be the greatest when it comes to social activities, but that doesn't mean that he is blind to the interactions that his peers have with others. Be it one, another, or someone outside of Class 1A, he sees, and he connects the dots that he is given. It's through this pattern of observation and comprehension that Shoto comes to realize that Izuku Midoriya is somewhat like him, but in a different sort of way. While Shoto has grown up in an obvious shadow, forever stuck with the title of Endeavor's son, Midoriya has been burdened with a shadow that few remain aware of. Shoto is one of the few that even knows of the weight Midoriya carries by himself, and a feeling of understanding forms deep within him, even as the greenette tries to deny his words. But Shoto understands his willful deception, understands why Midoriya tries to brush off the truth as if Shoto is somehow wrong in his realizations. Midoriya must have gotten used to brushing things off, so quickly after all. One can't go their entire life without someone figuring out the little things, and they especially cannot hide from such a monumental truth without covering it up with lies. So when Midoriya frantically denies Shoto's question, Shoto lets him. He will not push, because everyone has their secrets, and Midoriya must have his reasons for keeping this one so closely guarded. Instead, he merely brushes past it, acknowledging the boy's right to privacy before declaring that he will surpass Midoriya, All Might's secret love child or not. Then their fated battle passes, and Shoto wins, but in a way it seems that Midoriya does too. He has a warm smile on his face even as he leaves the school with twisted fingers and an aura that seems to scream, "I am here," just like his father. Shoto sees him, and he acknowledges that Midoriya is much like him, even when he isn't. The boy is burdened with a truth that pushes him onwards, except Midoriya seems to have found a true hero of a father, while Shoto has only one in title and not in heart. Midoriya is what Shoto should have been, Shoto supposes, and yet with that warm smile and caring composure, Shoto can't find it in himself to be bitter in the slightest. No, Shoto just feels a connection, one that can only be formed between two people with such high expectations and high standards for the future. And then he realizes, not long after, that perhaps Midoriya is more like Shoto than he first believed. It's after Hosu. It's after Shoto receives a cryptic text from Midoriya, after Shoto races to an alley to find Midoriya paralyzed on the ground with two others behind him. It's after Shoto sees the aura once again, that drive that's so reminiscent of All Might, with a wide smile and a promise to help, and yet is so uniquely Midoriya in how his teeth are bared, and he throws himself in harm's way to keep anyone else from feeling the same pain. It's after all this, after Shoto finds himself feeling even closer to this boy who hides behind an invisible shadow, that Shoto finds out the boy's life is not as wonderful as it should be. And he finds out completely by accident. It's late May, and his peers are starting to look forward to the quickly approaching end of semester. Somehow, talk of summer plans shift to talk of holidays, which brings up a certain June holiday that Shoto tends to ignore. Father's Day. Shoto does his best to tune out his classmates as they talk about their plans for the day. Some mention homemade gifts, others admit to traditions that they usually do every single year, from cleaning the house to making meals to simply spending the day with their fathers. Everyone offers at least a hint of what they do to celebrate their paternal figure. Even Bakugo admits that he cooks for his dad with a hint of pride. Except for Midoriya, who stays silent throughout the entire conversation. Shoto notices this and wonders what Midoriya and All Might do for the day. He supposes that the two enjoy themselves. All Might isn't very subtle when it comes to his favoritism, which Shoto also supposes makes sense. Parents usually do feel fondly for their children. All Might wouldn't be an exception, obviously. This very belief is why Shoto feels so surprised mere seconds after his belief is locked in place. "What about you, Deku-kun?" Uraraka asks, turning all the attention onto the green-haired boy. "What do you do for Father's Day?" Oh. Midoriya begins to shake, a fact that does not go unnoticed by Shoto. Well, actually, Deku doesn't celebrate Father's Day. Bakugo cuts in, rolling his eyes. Can't celebrate if the man's never there. Shoto hears a few gasps and watches as Midoriya curls in on himself. "Bakugo, that is not something you should say in class." Ida reprimands him, arm chopping wildly, but Bakugo just snorts. "Why the hell not? It's true, ain't it?" Midoriya doesn't refute, and this fact doesn't go unnoticed by anyone. The effect is immediate, some apologizing for their ignorance, others for prying, A few like Uraraka seem personally offended by this truth. But Shoto feels the worst, without a doubt. I'm just as bad as every fan of my father, Shoto realizes, and he forces his realization to stay hidden off of his expression, by assuming that All Might was a perfect father, by assuming that, oh, of course, All Might's a good parent, that he's the #1 hero, after all. Wasn't he doing just what everyone had done to him, ignoring the truth and being blinded by a reality that truthfully never existed? He'd been so adamant in his belief, with what Midoriya seemed to look up to All Might, and the hero constantly invited the Green Net to eat lunch with him. But Shoto was wrong. Midoriya didn't even try to protest against Bakugo, which means All Might left Midoriya not only in his shadow, but straight up left him. Left Izuku Midoriya, one of the kindest, greatest, truest people Shoto has ever met, without a second thought. And here, Shoto thought that Midoriya's shakiness and stutter was due to his apparent past with Bakugo. No, of course it was because of the hero. Shoto feels disgust rear up in him, disgust at what heroes truly are when no one's looking, at least by leaving Midoriya for so long that Midoriya's longtime friend, Bakugo, doesn't even know the truth. Midoriya hasn't gained such a double-sided personality. He'll be a better hero than his father, Shoto thinks, and this feeling of understanding only grows, and his trust in the symbol of peace withers before his eyes. Everyone has secrets. Shoto knows this for a fact. He just wishes that Midoriya wasn't All Might's secret, that All Might was more sincere than he truly is. But everyone has a right to privacy, and Shoto isn't one for confrontation that he cannot win, and he knows that he cannot take down the symbol of peace. Shoto can, however, be a pillar of support for Midoriya, and so that's exactly what he will be. The two of them will get through life together, and when Midoriya feels ready to air his secrets, Shoto will be there for him, in ways his father was not. Chapter 2. Part 2, Aizawa's Observations. Shota Aizawa is many things. He's an underground hero, a strict teacher, a man who is perpetually exhausted due to those first two things, and more. But one thing he is not is unobservant. His constant fatigue and need for coffee does not negate his ability to see the obvious, nor the more subtle nuances about his students, either. As such, it doesn't take long for Aizawa to see the changes in Shoto Todoroki. And he's intrigued. It starts not long after the internships have ended. Well, no, it starts right after the internships, but then it grows into something different. Todoroki branches out. He starts to talk to his peers more, although it's mainly Ida and Midoriya, and mostly Midoriya. This is logical, Aizawa knows. The three went through the final hero-killer attack together, and those sorts of things forge bonds like nothing else can. Aizawa sees this change and says nothing, because there's nothing to be said. He's just relieved that Todoroki is finally reaching out and connecting to others. You can't be a hero for long if you can't find an ally to trust. Even underground heroes have people that they can and do rely on. But not long after these new friendships form, Aizawa notices how Todoroki goes from wading into the metaphorical shadows of companionship to plunging right into the deep end. The boy is suddenly by Midoriya constantly. They walk into class together, they go to lunch already, knee-deep in conversation. They leave for hero training side by side and more. The only time that the two aren't talking is when class is in session, and even then Aizawa has caught Todoroki's attention drifting as his eyes stayed to watch the problem child. It's not unusual whatsoever for Midoriya to be so close to someone. Aizawa's seen Midoriya act. The boy takes to friendship like someone who's been starved for affection their entire life. He's quick to latch onto friends, and has done so with Ida and Uraraka. Hell, Aizawa's seen the boy trying to befriend that Shinzo kid from Gen Ed, despite the other's attempts to scare him off. And Aizawa knows about Shinzo's attempts to knock the boy off of his scent, because it once happened when Aizawa was leading the boy off to train, so it makes sense that Midoriya would be trying to get closer to Todoroki. But it's not Midoriya coming to Todoroki, no. Todoroki is the one chasing after Midoriya. Todoroki's the one approaching the other practically every time. Even when it is Midoriya who approaches Todoroki, the bicolored boy gives his complete attention from the moment Midoriya stands up. Sometimes even before the problem child stands up, it's as if Todoroki's thinking of nothing but being by Midoriya's side. And Aizawa would brush that off, because Todoroki seems to be just as attention-starved as Midoriya. With how he's chasing the smaller boy, it makes sense that Todoroki would act this way, since Midoriya was there when Stain attacked them, and that they forged a bond. But Ida was there too, and Todoroki keeps his distance around Ida still. Something doesn't line up in Aizawa's observations, and it gnaws at him. He wants to set it aside, to ignore the things that he sees and let them be, but he can't quite seem to stop noticing it. He asks his coworkers what they think. Stupid, maybe, but it's the best chance he's got. Have you guys noticed something different about Todoroki? He asks, and he watches how Yamada pauses. Todoroki? No, the little listener seems fine. Well, no, he seems happier lately, hanging out with his buds. Yamada says, and Aizawa hums. I've noticed, Aizawa says, and Kayama raises an eyebrow at his tone. What are you thinking, Aizawa? Kayama asks, and Aizawa sighs. It's odd. Something just doesn't line up. Ooh, Aizawa has a theory going on. Yamada cheers, and Aizawa watches his co-worker shift around in his chair so that he's facing Aizawa, eyes lit up with excitement. Lay it on us, Shota. Aizawa rolls his eyes, but continues. Todoroki has been noticeably closer with the problem child since internships had ended. Their friendship likely started due to their run-in with Stain. It's the trauma, Yamada says with a stoic nod. That's what I thought, but Ida was there as well, and while Todoroki has grown closer to him, it's not the same amount. What do you mean? Kayama asks, and Aizawa frowns, glaring at the paper he was grading. I'm not sure. Todoroki's willing to talk with Ida, but he follows Midori around like a lost puppy, I suppose. I don't think I've seen Todoroki not by Midoriya's side since a few weeks ago. Closing his eyes, Aizawa recalls the change. It wasn't an immediate change. He wasn't following him around since the day he came back. It wasn't until at least a week had passed for the real change to occur. I just can't figure out why. Aizawa doesn't really expect an answer, but he didn't expect to hear laughter of all things. He snaps his eyes open, glaring at the two who simply laugh louder in response. I can't believe it. Yamada gets out, and Aizawa feels his eye twitch. What? Aizawa asks, and Kayama giggles. You're worried because Todoroki has a crush, Shota, Kayama says, wiping a tear from her eye. The constant following, the lost puppy analogy. God, Shota, have you never seen a boy have a crush? Aizawa blinks in surprise, and then hums. Oh. He's subjected to another round of laughter, but he sits through it. At least he finally understands. He doesn't. All right, everyone. This concludes Chapter 2 of Todoroki's Conspiracy. Let me know your guys' thoughts and reactions to this. I'll be back with Chapter 3 for you next, and as always, thank you so much for listening.